The door slammed so hard the chandelier shook. Madam Park's voice cut through the dining room like a blade. "Get out of my house." Adeola didn't move. Her hands were flat on the table, pressing down, steadying herself, steadying the child growing inside her that nobody in this room deserved to know about yet. Her eyes stayed level. Her breathing stayed controlled. But her heart was doing something she had never felt before. It was breaking and hardening at the exact same time. "I said get out." The envelope was still on the table, white, crisp, sealed with the kind of careful precision that told Adeola this moment had been planned long before tonight. This was not an outburst. This was an execution, and every person sitting at that table had known it was coming. Every person except her. She turned slowly to her left, to the man she had married, the man who had promised her a life inside this world, the man whose ring she was still wearing. Junhyuk was staring at his plate. Not at her, not at his mother, not at the envelope that was supposed to destroy everything, at his plate, at nothing, at the deliberate, cowardly middle ground between action and absence. That silence told her everything she had spent 2 years refusing to believe. She was alone in this room. She had always been alone in this room. Madam Park snapped her fingers at the household staff, standing frozen along the wall. "Pack her things, every single item, downstairs now." One of the younger maids flinched and looked toward Junhyuk, as if waiting for him to contradict the order, as if waiting for the eldest son of the Park family to stand up and say no, to say something, to be the man his wife had believed he was. He reached for his glass instead. Adeola felt the room tilt, not from dizziness, from clarity, the sharp, brutal kind of clarity that arrives only after the last illusion dies. She pushed her chair back slowly. She stood without trembling. She looked at Madam Park, really looked at her, longer than was comfortable, longer than the older woman expected, and she said nothing. Because there was nothing worth saying to someone who had already decided the outcome before the conversation began. She walked toward the staircase. Behind her, Madam Park's voice followed. "Women like you have been doing this for centuries, trapping wealthy men with children. Did you think I wouldn't find out? Did you think I raised my son to be foolish?" Adeola climbed the stairs one at a time. That child is a transaction, nothing more, and no transaction will ever carry the Park name with dignity. She reached the top of the stairs. She did not look back. Inside the bedroom she had shared with Junhyuk for 2 years, she opened her wardrobe and stood there for a moment. Just a moment. Her fingers touched the fabric of a dress she had worn on their first anniversary, a pale ivory dress. The night he had looked at her like she was the only thing in the world that mattered. She pulled a travel bag from the top shelf, and she began to pack. By the time she came back downstairs, the rain had started. Not a gentle rain, the kind of rain that Seoul saves for its cruelest nights, heavy, relentless, cold with the particular bitterness of early autumn. The staff had stacked her remaining boxes near the front door. They couldn't look at her. Most of them had worked in this house for years. Some of them had been kind to her. All of them were powerless. She understood that. What she could not understand, what she would not understand for a long time, was how she walked past the main living room and saw Junhyuk standing at the window, looking out at the rain, arms folded, still, as if he were watching something that had nothing to do with him. She stopped. For 1 second she stopped. Because she was still human, because she had loved this man with something real and unperformed and patient. Because somewhere inside the armored composure she had built for this moment, there was still a woman who needed her husband to turn around. He didn't turn around. She walked out the front door. The rain hit her immediately, cold and indiscriminate. She stood on the stone steps of the Park mansion, 2 bags in hand, a life condensed into luggage, and she felt the full weight of every single moment that had led her here. She was pregnant, she was alone, she had no car, she had no plan. And behind her, through the tall mahogany doors that were already swinging shut, the Park family returned to their dinner. She stood in the rain until a taxi finally appeared at the end of the long driveway, its yellow light blurring through the water and the dark. She raised her hand. She got in. She gave an address, a small guest house in Mapogu that a colleague had once mentioned, and then she sat back and pressed her hand to her stomach. "It's all right," she whispered, not for herself, for the child. "We're going to be all right." She said it the way people say things they are not yet sure are true, but must believe in order to survive the night. She said it with everything she had. The taxi pulled into traffic. The mansion disappeared behind the rain, and for the first time in 2 years, Adunni Adebayo was completely free of the Park family. She just didn't know yet what that freedom would cost her, or what it would eventually build. The months that followed were not cinematic. They were not dignified. They were the kind of months that test everything a person believes about themselves. The months that sit between devastation and recovery with no clear landmark, no clear end, no one to tell you that you're going to make it through. Adunni found a small apartment, 2 rooms, a narrow kitchen, a window that looked out onto a concrete wall. She was frugal in a way she had never needed to be before. She took small architectural consulting contracts, the kind of unglamorous, low-budget work that larger firms turn down, residential renovations, layout assessments for mid-level commercial projects. She sat at a second-hand desk, and she drew and calculated and submitted proposals, and sometimes won, and sometimes didn't. And she never once allowed herself to think about what she had left behind. Because what she had left behind was not a life, it was the illusion of one. Amara was born on a Wednesday in March. It was not a complicated birth. She came into the world efficiently and without drama, as if she already understood that life was going to require a certain pragmatism from her. Adunni held her daughter for the first time and felt something she had no name for, a love so specific and structural it felt less like emotion and more like architecture, like something built to last. She named her Amara. It meant grace. It meant eternal. It meant both things at once, which felt exactly right. She did not tell the Park family. She did not tell anyone in Seoul's real estate circles. She kept her professional name clean and her personal life invisible. She worked during Amara's naps and after Amara's bedtime, and sometimes through the night when a deadline pressed. She was exhausted in a way that had no adequate language. But she was also becoming something. She had always been an exceptional architect, rigorous, creative, precise in a way that went beyond technical skill into genuine spatial intuition. She understood how people move through space, how light and height and material affected mood and aspiration, how a building could communicate power or warmth or invitation without a single word of signage. She had that gift. She had always had it. The Park world had simply buried it under expectation and silence. Now there was no one to bury anything. Her first significant independent project was a mid-density residential development in Incheon, affordable housing with design quality that nobody expected at that budget level. The kind of project that other architects overlooked because the margins were thin and the prestige was low. Adunni took it because she needed the work. She delivered something that stopped people mid-walk when they passed it. Clean geometry, thoughtful communal spaces, a quiet dignity built into every line. An article in an architectural journal described it as an unexpected intervention. A Seoul developer called and asked if she had capacity for a second project. She said yes before she finished reading the email. 2 turned into 5. 5 turned into 10. The firm she had quietly incorporated, Adebayo Urban Holdings, a name she had chosen with her father's legacy in mind, and her own ambition as the compass, began attracting attention from international investors looking for emerging urban developers in Asia. What nobody knew, what she had never told anyone in Seoul, was that her father had been watching. Chief Emmanuel Adebayo was not a man who announced himself. He was a man who observed. He had watched his daughter be humiliated, watched her struggle, watched her refuse to ask for help, and he had respected that refusal completely. He was waiting for the moment she didn't need him, because that was the only moment when his help would mean something other than rescue. That moment came during the third year, when Adebayo Urban Holdings closed its first cross-border deal, a mixed-use development project in Singapore with a mid-tier regional investor. Small by global standards, enormous by the standards of where Adeola had started. Her father called that evening. "I've been watching," he said. "I know," she replied. "You're ready." "I've been ready." He laughed, the slow, proud laugh of a man who had suspected this but needed to hear it confirmed. Then he said, "I'm going to open some doors. What you do when you walk through them is still entirely yours." Within 18 months, his global investment network, quietly, efficiently, through channels that didn't announce themselves, began directing capital toward Adebayo Urban Holdings. The right conversations happened in the right rooms. The firm's portfolio doubled, then tripled. Then Adeola hired a team of 12, then 30, then 60. She moved into offices on the 43rd floor of a glass tower in Gangnam with views of the Han River and a conference room that felt like a declaration. She was 34 years old. She was the CEO of an international property firm. She had a daughter who was 3 years old and already had opinions about everything. And the Park family, in a cruelty that the universe seemed to have arranged specifically for this season, was falling apart. Madam Park had made several catastrophic investment decisions during the boom years when Seoul's luxury real estate seemed invincible. Overextended developments, aggressive borrowing, the kind of confident overreach that belongs entirely to people who have never lost. When the credit environment shifted and several flagship projects stalled simultaneously, the debt structure of the Park portfolio became visible in its full ugliness. Banks began calling loans. Creditors who had been patient ran out of patience. The Park family's empire, those luxury apartment towers, those commercial skyscrapers, those high-end developments that Madam Park had wielded like a social weapon, began to crack from the foundation upward. By the time whispers started circulating in Seoul's real estate circles about a distressed portfolio sale, Adeola already knew. She had sources now. She had a team. She had intelligence. She sat with the acquisition brief for 3 days before she made a decision. Then she called her financial director and said 4 words. "Put in the offer." Now, before we continue, because what comes next is the part of this story that changes everything, we want to take just a moment to step outside the story and speak directly to you. If you've been watching with us tonight, then you are part of the Velvet Empire family, and we don't take that lightly. We want to pray over you right now, not as a formality, not as a performance, but because we genuinely believe that the people who sit with these stories, who feel them, who understand the weight of what it means to be underestimated and overlooked and still refuse to stop, deserve to be covered. So receive this. May good health rest over you like a covering that does not lift. May your body be strong and your mind be clear, and may every hidden illness be exposed and removed before it takes root. May no sudden tragedy visit your home without warning. May you wake each morning with the quiet confidence of someone who knows they are protected. May your home be a place of peace, not the fragile peace that depends on perfect circumstances, but the deep, structural peace that holds even when things outside are uncertain. May your children walk in favor that they did not earn and cannot explain. May your grandchildren inherit blessings that were stored up before they were born. May every door that matters open for them at exactly the right time. May your finances stabilize in this season. May what you have stretched further than mathematics can explain. May wisdom guide every significant decision you face, the kind of wisdom that is not loud but is always right. And may the things you have carried quietly, the grief you haven't named, the fatigue that nobody sees, the longing for things to finally be easier, may all of that find resolution. May your later years be full. May joy arrive and make itself at home. May you look back one day and understand why every hard season was necessary. That is our blessing over you tonight. If you received that, please like this video, leave an amen in the comments, and if you haven't subscribed yet, please do. Subscribing is genuinely the only way this channel keeps running. It's how we keep bringing you these stories. You are not just a viewer. You are the reason the Velvet Empire exists. Now back to Seoul. The morning of the acquisition meeting, Adeola woke at 5. She stood at the window of her apartment, a different apartment now, high and spacious and full of light, and she drank her tea in silence. Amara was still asleep. The city below was just beginning to move, the Han River catching the first suggestion of sunrise, the bridges empty and clean. She thought about the night she had stood in the rain outside the Park mansion with 2 bags and a taxi at the end of the driveway. She thought about it the way you think about a scar, not with bitterness, but with the specific respect you give to things that remade you. Then she got dressed. She wore charcoal, clean lines, no jewelry except small gold earrings that had belonged to her mother. She pulled her hair back. She looked at herself in the mirror for exactly 3 seconds, the professional's assessment, nothing more, and she was satisfied. Amara appeared in the doorway in her pajamas, holding a stuffed animal and squinting against the light. "Where are you going, Mommy?" "To a meeting. An important one." Adeola picked her up and held her for a moment. This child who was grace and eternity, and the best thing that had ever come from the worst night of her life. "Very important," she said, "but I'll be back before dinner." She kissed her daughter's forehead. Then she set her down gently and walked out of the apartment. The Park family had gathered in the main reception room of the mansion. It was not the celebratory gathering of a family welcoming a business partner. It was the assembled posture of people bracing for an unpleasant necessity. Madam Park sat at the head of the long table in the same chair she had occupied the night she threw Adeola out. Jun Hyuk was to her left, in a suit that looked slightly too large for him now, as if something inside him had diminished. His younger siblings sat further down the table, with the carefully arranged expressions of people who had been coached not to react. The family's lead attorney stood near the window, holding a folder. They were waiting for the representative of the acquiring firm. They had been told to expect a senior partner from Adebayo Urban Holdings. They had done their research on the company, a fast-rising international property firm with strong African investment backing and an impressive Southeast Asian portfolio. They had been slightly surprised that they had never encountered the name before in Seoul's circles. But in their current position, they were not in a place to be selective. The door opened. The first thing the room heard was the sound of heels on the marble floor, measured, unhurried, the footsteps of someone who was not nervous. Then she appeared in the doorway. The room did not react with noise. The room reacted with silence, the catastrophic, total silence of people whose understanding of reality has just been fundamentally disrupted. Adeola Adebayo walked into the Park family mansion. She was wearing charcoal and holding a slim document portfolio, and she looked like someone who owned the building she was standing in, which, as of that morning, she did. Beside her, holding her hand and looking around at the vaulted ceilings and the expensive furniture with the frank curiosity of a 3-year-old who has no idea what this place means, was Amara. Madam Park's face went through 4 expressions in 2 seconds. None of them were good. Jun Hyuk stood up from his chair, then sat back down, then stood up again, his mouth opened. Adeola walked to the table and set her portfolio down. She looked at Madam Park, directly, calmly, the way you look at something that no longer has power over you. "Good morning," she said. Madam Park found her voice first, though it came out thinner than she intended. "What is this? What are you? How did you?" "I believe your attorney has the full transfer documentation," Adiola opened her portfolio and placed a clean stack of documents on the table. Property transfer certificates, ownership seals, bank confirmation of the completed transaction. Everything is in order. The attorney moved forward and began reviewing the paperwork. His expression, as he read, became very carefully neutral. Madam Park's eyes moved to Amara, who had found a decorative object on a side table and was examining it with great interest. "Is that—" She stopped. She couldn't finish the sentence. June Hyuk was staring at the child. The resemblance was not subtle. Amara had his bone structure, the strong jaw, the particular set of the eyes combined with Adiola's coloring, and the confident self-possession that belonged entirely to herself. He looked like a man watching something arrive that he had spent years trying not to think about. "The estate and all associated Park family commercial developments," Adiola said, her voice still measured and clear, "are now assets of Adebayo Urban Holdings. The terms are detailed in the documents your attorney is reviewing. There are no hidden clauses. It is straightforward." "This is—" Madam Park pushed back from the table. "You cannot do this. This is not." "It's entirely legal," Adiola said. "Your family's legal team vetted the acquisition process. The sale was conducted through proper channels at market rate given the current debt position. Everything was done correctly." She paused. "I made sure of that." The younger siblings exchanged glances. One of them, June Hyuk's younger sister, Ha-yoon, was looking at Adiola with an expression that had moved past shock into something that might, in different circumstances, have been respect. The attorney cleared his throat and confirmed it quietly to Madam Park. "The documents are in order, Madam Park. The transaction is complete." The room absorbed that. Madam Park sat back down slowly. For the first time in the 2 years Adiola had lived in this house, the older woman looked small. Not physically, she was still the same imperious figure in her structured dress and careful makeup, but something essential had evacuated the room. The authority that she had always worn like a second skin was gone, because authority requires an audience that fears you, and there was no one in this room who feared her anymore. "We will require the estate to be vacated," Adiola said. "You will find the official notice in the documentation, 30 days from today." Madam Park's head snapped up. 30 days. This is our home, this family has. 30 days, Adiola said again. Not with cruelty, not with satisfaction, with the clean, final authority of someone reading a legal reality. The same notice period that would apply to any tenant of an Adebayo Urban Holdings property. The same notice period, the room understood without her saying it, that had been afforded to her when she was thrown out in the rain. Madam Park looked at June Hyuk. The silent demand, "Do something, say something, be what I raised you to be in this moment," was vivid in her eyes. June Hyuk was still looking at Amara. The little girl had lost interest in the decorative object and was now standing beside her mother, examining the tall ceiling with its ornate cornicing. Then she looked at her mother's face. She reached up and took Adiola's hand. "Mommy," she said, in the particular voice of a child who is about to ask something embarrassingly direct, "did you used to live here?" The question entered the room and occupied it completely. Every eye moved to Adiola. She looked down at her daughter. Something moved across her face, not grief, not anger, not nostalgia. Something quieter and more complete than any of those things. Something that looked like resolution. "Only briefly," she said. She picked up her portfolio. She held Amara's hand. And she walked back toward the door through which she had entered, through the marble hallway, past the staff who stood along the walls in the same positions they had occupied the night they watched her be thrown out, past the chandelier, past the staircase she had climbed one final time 3 years ago with trembling hands and a breaking heart. The front door opened. She walked through it into the morning light. Behind her, the Park family stood in a house that was no longer theirs, in a silence that had no recovery. That night the knock came at 9. Adeola was at her desk, Amara long since asleep, the apartment quiet with the particular quality of silence that follows accomplished things. She opened the door and found Jun Hyuk standing in the hallway. He was not in his business suit. He was in the kind of ordinary, rumpled clothes that people wear when they are no longer performing anything. He looked like a man who had driven around for 2 hours before deciding where to go. She looked at him for a moment, then she opened the door wider and let him in. He sat in the living room. He looked around at the space she had built, the photographs on the shelves, a small drawing by Amara taped to the refrigerator visible through the kitchen doorway, the bookshelves full of architectural texts and worn novels, and the small accumulated evidence of a real life. He looked at it all like a man seeing something he had forfeited. "Adeola," he said. "I don't," she said, not harshly, just with clarity. "If you're here to explain, I don't need the explanation. If you're here to apologize, then say the apology. Say exactly what you're apologizing for." He was quiet for a moment. "I should have followed you out that night." "Yes." "I should have said something at the table." "Yes." I believed her, the insinuation. I told myself I didn't, but I did, and I chose her certainty over your truth because it was easier. He stopped. "That's the thing I can't make that smaller than it is." "No," Adeola agreed, "you can't." He looked at her. There was grief in his face, real, late, the specific grief of someone who has finally understood the full cost of what they did. "Is there," he stopped again, "is there anything left, any possibility of?" "Jun Hyuk," her voice was not unkind, but it was completely final. "You didn't betray me with words. You didn't betray me with accusations or cruelty. Your mother did that. You betrayed me with silence. And silence is the one betrayal that can't be walked back, because when it was happening, you were right there. You could have spoken at any moment. You chose every second of that silence." He closed his eyes. "I know," he said. "Amara will know who her father is," Adeola said. "I won't keep that from her. That decision will eventually be hers to make, but she is mine. This life is mine. I built it without you, and it is complete without you." She stood. He stood. He looked at her for a long moment, at the woman he had married who had become something he couldn't have imagined on the night he let her walk out into the rain. "I'm sorry," he said, "truly." "I believe you," she said. And then she opened the door. Not in anger, not in triumph. In the serene, grounded authority of a woman who had walked through the very worst of what this man's family had done to her, and had come out the other side more fully herself than she had ever been. He walked out. The door closed. Adeola stood in the middle of her living room for a moment. She looked at Amara's drawing on the refrigerator. 3 stick figures, she had not yet identified them to Adeola, which was its own particular small mystery. A house with a very large sun. The specific, unself-conscious joy of a child drawing what she loves. Adeola smiled. Then she went to her desk, opened her laptop, and began reviewing proposals for Adebayo Urban Holdings' next development. 47 floors, mixed use, a building that would change the way a neighborhood felt from the inside out. She had work to do. "Before we close tonight, we have to ask, are you okay after that? Because Jun Hyuk and that door and that silence, that hit differently, didn't it? Drop in the comments, are you team, give him one more chance, or team, the door is closed forever? We genuinely want to know what you think. Your comments are what make these stories feel alive. And if you want more stories like this one, more women who build empires out of the wreckage of being underestimated, more power shifts and quiet revenge and love that refuses to become bitterness, then you need to go through our channel and find what else the Velvet Empire has been building for you. Every story is waiting. Every one of them will find you in exactly the moment you need it. Like this video if Adeola earned your respect tonight. Subscribe if you're staying. And remember, this family keeps going because you keep showing up. We'll see you in the next story. And if you thought this ending was powerful, wait until you see what happens when Amara grows up and asks her mother to take her back to Seoul. That story is coming.